Now I'm going to ditch the saying. We'll get to the topic of the hour. Jordan is here from Virginia, correct? Runs a diversified pastured enterprise. He's going to get into all the details in this and later presentations. So he will be speaking for about 40 minutes, and then we have 20 minutes allocated for question and answer. Without further ado, I'm going to turn this thing off, and we'll give a welcome to Jordan.
All right, so awesome to be here with you guys. Coming out to Iowa, it was 50 degrees when I left Virginia at 4:45 the other morning, and I landed here, and we were like, what is this white stuff? We do get some snow there every now and then. Pasture turkeys. Who in here already does turkeys to some extent on pasture? Okay, who wants to do them someday, and who never wants to do them again? You probably wouldn't be here in this talk. A few years ago, we did get a call from the Marine Corps, and they were looking for a few good turkeys. Joe, you're welcome to laugh at the analogy there.
Where the chair?
So fortunately, we had a few left. They filmed this like 10 days before Thanksgiving, and it had just snowed the night before. But it's funny that they used it on their social media. And but there are some parallels to producing turkeys, that sometimes you feel like you were just chasing the bird around the pasture and not getting anywhere, and it might be easier just to go to the store and buy one. All right, so we'll get into some of the operation. Like I was introduced, my name is Jordan Green. That's my wife Laura there, and as you can see, why I welcome jokes about Marines is I did 5 years in the Marines, so all of your crayon eating jokes are welcome. Navy jokes, whatever you got, I can take it, you can lay it on. I served 5 years in the Marine Corps, was in from 04 to 09. My wife was in banking at that time. Around 2008, we decided we wanted to move back to Virginia and start a farm. And we had this audacious goal of starting a farm. Do you want to hear what it is? We wanted to make a full-time income from a farming operation. That's about 5% or less of people that are in ag today actually make their full-time income from a farm. But you know, we were young and stupid. 2008, what was going on in 08?
Crisis.
Housing crisis, financial crisis. You know, we owned a house in South Carolina where I was stationed, and we decided we were going to come back and start the farm. And I remember walking into what's called maintenance control, which is like where the activity of the squadron takes place. And I told one of the superior guys who was there, one of the bosses, he was like, so are you going to re-enlist to go on deployment again with us? I'd already done 2 deployments. They're like, do you want to go back and do a 3rd one? I was like, no, I think my wife are going to get out and start a farm. He was like, great. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. He proceeded to give me a 10-minute lecture on why that was a dumb idea. But you know, we were young and dumb, so we ditched that, went back to Virginia and started a farm. And had some kids along the way, so that's the family Christmas photo from this year. So it's not the 5-year-old photo of the kids, it's fairly current. We've got our oldest son, Justin, he's 14. We have Allie, who is 11, and Wyatt, who is turning 10 here soon. So together, my wife and I started J&L Green Farm. So we are based in Shenandoah County, Virginia, which is about 90 minutes west of DC. So we have access to a lot of the Northern Virginia, DC market. We also ship nationwide and deliver other areas around the state. Between owning and leasing, we manage about 500 acres of ground right now, and we are a direct-to-retail farm. So almost everything we produce goes to the end consumer or to other farms that are retail-oriented as well. That's our farm sign out front. So this is what we produce. We do pastured turkeys, we do pastured broiler chickens, we do grass-finished beef, and pastured pigs. So if you come for the second talk, that's where we'll talk about all things pigs. But for this one, we're going to stick with turkeys. So where we live in Virginia is the heart of turkey production in the country. Back in 1922, a guy named Charles Wampler Sr. Became the first guy to incubate turkey eggs successfully. Before that, They would have to go out and find the day-old turkeys out in the edges of the woods, or you'd have to let the hen set on the eggs. When our daughter was being born, I think it was her, one of those two was being born at the hospital. You know, if you're a dad and the wife just had the baby at the hospital, what are you doing with yourself, really? You're just kind of existing there. So I went down to the cafeteria, and there was this old guy there, like really old gentleman. And I was friends with some other people there, and they're like, hey, that's Charles Wampler Jr., that's the son. And he's almost 100 years old at that time. So I went over and talked to him, introduced myself, and we had a very nice conversation. He's like, oh, what do you do? And I said, well, one of the things we do is we raise turkeys on pasture. And he got this real, 1,000-yard look in his eyes. He was like, yeah, we used to do it that way, back when I was young. And he told me about how they used to raise turkeys on pasture before it became big industry. Such a big industry in the area that they have statues. We have statues to turkeys in the area to let everybody know this is where turkeys happen. The county just below us, which is Rockingham County, produces 16 million turkeys a year, all in confinement. It is big turkey business. They started with, Mr. Wampler told me, collecting eggs from bronze turkeys, similar to wild turkeys you would see here. These are on our farm. Obviously much different than what, the way turkeys are produced nowadays. The inside of a standard turkey barn in Virginia is what the outside of a lot of turkey production looks like. In the county I live in, the county below, there's a couple thousand poultry houses between turkeys and broiler chickens. So it is big poultry. We decided though when we started the farm that we wanted to not be locked into a particular production model. It's kind of hard when you're starting a new business, especially in farming, as I'm sure a lot of you can relate. You kind of have to make a huge commitment up front if you're going to get into any kind of commodity production. That you're building a big building, you're building a couple of them, you're going to be doing whatever that is, whether it's chickens, layers, turkeys, pigs, whatever. You're going to be doing that for a couple decades just to get through it. So it doesn't matter if 10 years later you don't enjoy doing that, you're stuck doing it. We wanted to have a semblance of freedom in what we were doing, that we could adapt and adjust to what the market wanted. After all, that's the point of any business, is you should produce and sell what the market wants. Otherwise, you're just kind of spinning your wheels. So doing something like this was not for us, for a variety of reasons, but we'll stick primarily to the production side of it here. We end up doing pastured turkeys. Those of you who do turkeys, obviously when's the easiest time of year to sell turkey?
Thanksgiving.
Sure, 4 days before Thanksgiving. What's the hardest day of the year to sell a turkey? Black Friday. Day after Thanksgiving, you are not going to sell a turkey. So it's an enterprise that has some very unique challenges to it, but also a lot of rewards if it is managed well. So what I wanted to share with you guys is some of the ways over the last 13 years that we've been doing turkeys that we've figured out how to make it simple so that we're not pulling our hair out and not losing our shirt from some bad management decisions. So what it starts with, some keys for success. Number one is simplified systems. That would seem to make common sense, but a lot of operators end up overcomplicating things. Something I heard said a long time ago that really rings true for anything you're developing on a farm. This guy said the hallmark of good design is simplicity. Real complicated stuff, not good. We don't want a space shuttle on the farm. We want something that is simple. So the more that we can take away from an idea and a system, the better. The more pieces that we can pull away and turn that 3,000 piece Lego set into maybe a 300 piece Lego set, but still fly, the better. The second one is complementary actions or enterprises. The most time spent doing something often is the beginning and ending of it. So if you're going to go out in the field to check on the turkeys, it's going to take you the same exact amount of time to get on the gator or the four-wheeler, go out there and come back, whether there's one turkey out there or 1,000 turkeys. So it's how can you make what you're doing complementary to other things. So if we're going out there to do chores or something else, can we hit pigs at the same time? And I'll show you here in a couple slides a way that we were able to combine the pigs and the turkeys together to really hammer in on this point. If you guys don't mind, I'm going to wander around a little bit. Scale efficiency. In the regenerative livestock space, it's almost a dirty word to talk about scale. That, oh, small is righteous, large is evil. That's not true. It's the management that you use. I've seen small farms that are horribly managed, and I've seen big farms that are very well managed. So that's an irrelevant point to hammer on size. Scale is efficient. If you've got 500 birds in a group, it's far more efficient than 10 groups of 50. And that's why you can struggle at a small scale to be profitable in an enterprise, because you have all of these costs that are fixed and you can't navigate your way around. Those can be solved as you approach some kind of scale. Fourth one is knowing costs. Do you know how much it costs you to actually produce a turkey? We'll walk through that and actually peg, hey, how much do you need to sell this bird for? What's the one thing, those of you that are commodity farmers in the room, what's the one thing that you don't control on the farm?
Price.
Yeah, you can produce maybe a little bit better, and poultry in particular, commodity poultry has a tournament system, so if you are a little bit better than everybody else, you'll get a little bit more. But you really don't control price. And it's become a lost art in the farming community of how to establish a price. You ask somebody, hey, how much do you want for what you're selling? What's the common response a farmer will give you? Yeah, what will you give me for it? What's it worth to you? Well, it's worth about $5 to me. So as producers, we need to get real comfortable with putting a price on something. Something else that I hear a lot is, I would never pay that for it. Well, yeah, you would never pay that for it because you can produce it. You can produce a turkey in your sleep, or a pig, or a cow. That's not the question that the customer is asking. They can't produce that. So, yes, sir?
What about comparison to what's going on in like the grocery store?
There's a place for that. But we'll go over a sheet on how to arrive at the price and the sequence that you mentally need to go through first. That you never look first at what the grocery store is doing. Never. There is a comparison to that at some point, but not right out the gate. The fifth one, pricing power. That's what commodity agriculture has largely robbed producers of, is pricing power. You have no control over largely what you're getting paid for grains, for commodity produced animals, etc. That's something that, with a direct to retail operation, that's what we're taking back, is the ability to control the price. Now, if the market can't handle or support the price that we need to charge, well, what does that mean? That means we can't produce it. We need to do something else with our time. So this is where it all starts for us. I don't know about out here in the Midwest, but on the East Coast, these things are a dime a dozen. Sea containers. They're laying around everywhere. It's actually cheaper in China for them to make new ones and send them over here and just leave them here empty than it is for them to throw the empty ones back on the ships and send them back over there. So everybody's got connections, right? You got connections with people. You know a guy. So I know a guy. My sea container guy. So what we do is we brood in sea containers. Anyone want to guess why brooding in a steel box is a good idea?
Predator. Eliminates all predators.
There you go. Who has brooded poultry in an old barn? What happened? The rats, the skunks, the owls, whatever. What I've learned is everybody loves chicken. Nothing has an aversion to chicken. Everything loves chicken, loves turkey. It's our job to keep them safe. So this worked out very well. Instead of us building structures and having a concrete building, because we operate primarily on leased ground, it's like sea containers would be a great idea. Because you know what? No rat is ever chewing through that thing. We did find one little spot where they ended up having a little bit of a problem. I don't see if there's a laser on here. There we go. That little piece of rubber right there between the two doors had some rats chew a hole that big right through that spot on our trailer that we keep peanuts in. So it wasn't the brooder, it was the peanut trailer. They chewed that out. So now we have that 1 inch hole that rats can get in, so we just have to stick a piece of lumber in there. That stops that problem. But in sea containers, it gives us security of keeping predators away, which is primarily the main mortality issue that pastured poultry producers deal with, is predation. So we want to solve that right out the door. So this is how we build them out. We actually have a wall here that's built on a hinge so it can swing open whenever we want birds in and out of the brooder. We can just swing that open. These are all the control panels here on the sides that run heat, ventilation, etc. Something else that I've seen in kind of the local food, direct-to-retail, regenerative livestock space is this tendency to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We have 100 years of poultry house technology that we can tap into, but we're going to throw all that out and use stuff from the 50s for some reason and have higher mortality in the brooder when, hey, the poultry industry has designed some real cool stuff that we can use. We're just going to put it in a sea container instead of a 60 by 800 poultry farm. So we have ventilation control, thermostat control. We use electric infrared heaters, which is fantastic after you can get over the heart attack of how much they actually cost. But we can have a lot of things that hit one of those keys for success is efficiency. I don't ever have to check, is the propane out or is it too hot in the brooder? If it's too hot, the fan kicks on. If it gets too cold, the heaters kick on. If it's too hot and cold simultaneously, it'll kick heater and fan on at the same time. It will hold that temperature that we need to brood the birds. You have a question, sir?
Do you have trouble with working with contractors to help you do this, or are guys willing to share their knowledge with you?
Well, have you ever heard of an unfair advantage?
Yeah.
So our unfair advantage is we do all of this ourselves.
Okay.
I'm the oldest of 8 brothers, all of who are contractors, have businesses doing different things. So a lot of this, I don't have a picture here to show you the prototype that I did. It was roughly this. And then one of my brothers who is a full-time contractor, he's like, let me clean this up. And so this is what he did. Yeah, so this is prototyping new ideas. And that's a whole nother talk on how to innovate and design new ideas that work for these pasture enterprises. So our first one looked a little bit different than this, but it was a lot of the same principles.
Do you feel like brooding them in these containers that have no light, no outside air specifically, makes it hard for them to transition to outside?
No. But it is a progression of moving them out.
Okay.
So these do have, you can see the slot there on the top, and what we have is a series of air ducts up there that when the ventilation fan, you can see that silver thing all the way in the back, that's the fan, that blows air out. And so what that will do is blow hot air out. It draws cold air in at the top. Again, this is something learned from the poultry industry. You want to draw your cold air in at the top of the brooder, and then it sinks through the warmer air, so by the time it gets to the floor where your chicks are, they're not getting shocked. They're not going from 100 degrees to 20 degree air, and having this continual shock every time the fan's kicked on. You want that cold air to come in and sink down to the floor. That way it's warmed up by the time it gets down there. So it's what's called a negative pressure system. You have the fans kick on, blow air out, it opens the vents and draws air in. With turkeys, that was a great question you asked. So you can see we've got that screen door there. It has glass on it. When we brood chickens, that's not a problem, because the chickens aren't stupid like turkeys. Turkeys are one of the dumbest animals you will ever work with. Amen for those who have worked with them. What we've had to do when we brood turkeys is we have to cover that glass with paper. Because what the turkeys will do is they'll sit in that sunspot. Wherever the sun is, that's where they want to sit. And then it gets dark, and then the turkeys are like, oh, we're cold. And they don't, 3 feet away is the heat that they could go to. No, we're going to pile up right here where the sun was. And so you have to brood turkeys well and have low mortality, you do have to block out all the natural light, because they will go to wherever that is. They are that dumb. All right, we'll move along here. So this is what it looks like when birds are in there. So we got the infrared heat. You can see up here, there's 3 of those in there. It's all temperature controlled, so we keep it about 115 right underneath there. I've never seen a brooder too hot for turkeys. They really like a hot brooder. Different things, I'll show you a couple other pictures with feed and water. The drinkers that we use is called a loving system. We designed one specifically for turkeys, because this is how goofy turkeys are. If you use a regular nipple drinker, like you would use for broilers, where they just peck at the little shiny thing that hangs there, turkeys aren't quite smart enough to figure that out in the first week. So you got to have something a little bit easier for them. Just another picture here. You see the heaters in there. You got to have this little device here. You can have a little red ball for them to peck at. Turkeys love red. That's their favorite color in the world. If they see red, I must peck. And so you have this red ball here that they peck at, and what do when they peck at the ball? They get their beak up. And they're like, oh, that's where the water is. So for about a week, you have these in there, so they figure it out. The water's coming down through this straw here. It's kind of a neat little system that they have. But this keeps us from having to go in every couple hours and flip the bell drinkers over, refill them, get everything wet. Turkeys don't like being wet, that's an issue for them. They spill a lot of water. If you've brooded turkeys, having the 1 gallon flip over ones, you'll find turkeys drowned, in the little trough just around that thing, because that's a great place to die. Start out with the cardboard pans that you put feed and grit in, kind of get them used to having the troughs here. Anybody ever used a feather feeder? It's the 5 gallon bucket that snaps into like a little feeder base that's on there. They work really great. Until the turkeys are about 2 weeks old, the turkeys learn that they can hop inside the pail. And so we learned that lesson the hard way. 80 turkeys inside of one of those 5 gallon pails. Killed. Because they just keep hopping up there and, I'm gonna hop in, and then the other guy's like, I'm gonna hop in on top of the pile. So a very expensive lesson was learned. If you use the bucket feeder, put a lid on it. All right, so we keep them in the brooder for 5 weeks. Once they're 5 weeks old, we are progressively weaning them off of the heat. So you're decreasing the heater 1 degree a day, starting at about 3 weeks. And a lot of this is information that you can find out there on Google, but you don't want to just take them from nice hot brooder, throw them out in the field, they'll die. Until a turkey's about 8 weeks old, every day is a good day to die. And so your job is to keep him from dying. But at 5 weeks, they'll come out of the brooder. We'll put them out into pasture. We use a lot of these Salatin style pens that we built 10 years ago. We still have several, a bunch of them around that we're kind of running out their service light on. And the birds go into these for the next 5 weeks. So it's in the brooder for 5 weeks, in the Salatin pens for 5 weeks, and about 50 to 60 birds per pen. So the reason that we're going to put them in these is they're still pretty small. It's a 5-week-old turkey there. That does not need to be free ranging on the pasture. That will be hawk food the first day that they're out there. So again, it's kind of intermediate. They're not quite in the NICU. They've now moved into like the general infant nursery at the hospital. You still have to keep track of them. Be very careful with how you're managing them. We've learned we can't, in this stage, we can't run the pens on a hillside because they'll all pile up at the bottom corner of the pen when they get cold that first night. We are hardening the birds off to outdoor weather. So there is going to be an element of them being cold and learning how to adapt to that. But if you run the pens on the side of a hill, they're going to drop off and pile each other up in the corner, and you'll have a bunch of them dead in the morning. All right, so at 10 weeks old, this is where training camp starts. Boot camp for turkeys. And you have to keep it very simple because they're a very small-brained animal. So what we do, we have the pens right here. The pens have been moving from here to that end of the field. We set up a training pen. So this is using hog panels. One of the key principles on our farm is multi-use infrastructure and gear. We want to have as little single-use stuff as we possibly can. We want to be able to use it across a broad spectrum of possible enterprises. So we have a lot of hog panels because pigs is the primary thing that we do. We set up a training pen. We lift up the shelters, just lift them right up, herd all the turkeys into there, and they can start training to electric fence. Yes, you can train a turkey to electric fence. It's hilarious to watch because it takes them several days to learn that that little wire that's shocking them is something they should stay away from. But they will eventually train to electric fence. So we'll keep them for a week, maybe 10 days in this thing with wire on the inside. Because what the panel does, that gives us a physical barrier. If they hit it, they can't get through it, it'll knock them back. The wire starts training their mind to a psychological barrier. That I need to respect the little thing that shocks me when I touch it. Once we feel like they're trained to this, then we can put them out in nets. I don't know if you can see the wire running along right there. You see the post and the insulator, and there's the wire. They're all looking at it like, what's that? I should peck it. Now, who can tell me what kind of net that is?
Electro net from Premier One.
Yeah, what's different about it?
And it's shorter than normal.
It's not a poultry net.
Hog fence.
Yes.
It's hog net.
It's a hog net. Yeah, why would we use a hog net?
The bottom ones aren't.
No, because that's what we have.
Yeah.
We run a lot of pigs on pasture, so why do we want to have a whole other set of nets for turkeys if we can train them to respect that net? And so it was crazy when we tried it out at first. We're like, let's see if they'll respect the hog nets. Sure enough, they do. So, go
How
ahead.
high do you put that, initial wire when you're training them?
You want it right at waist height. So when they walk into it, it'll kind of hit them right at that wishbone level. This is the exact same fence setup that we use for pigs. We train turkeys the same exact way as we do pigs. And guess what? It does work. They respect this fence a lot more than they do a poultry net. Poultry nets are hard to keep well energized. They ground out super easy, a little bit of wet grass or something, and they're shorted out. And those of you who have done turkeys in nets, you know once they're 20, 30 pounds, they just march right over those suckers and kind of go out and do their turkey things. We've learned that we can use the same gear that we use for the pigs, we can also use for turkeys. What does that help us do? That helps us keep our infrastructure costs way down, because we don't have a whole special set of gear just for the turkeys and another one for the pigs. It also keeps it very simple. I don't have to tell the guys who are working on the farm, get the turkey stuff. I just say, get ready to move, because it's the same gear whether we're moving pigs or we're moving turkeys. All right, now putting them in nets, that does open us up to aerial predation. Hawks do like turkeys. Who here deals with bald eagles? They love turkey, really love turkey. So what we have is dogs. The best investment you can make in protecting poultry on pasture is dogs. We have Great Pyrenees that we use, and guess what? He's more terrified of the fence than any other farm animal. So he goes right in with the set, and he'll live the summer with sets of turkeys. Doesn't attack them, but if there's a hawk coming through, he'll run out and take care of business. Okay, it's more of the turkeys that are here on our pasture. We go until 1:30?
1:10 would be your 40-minute mark.
Okay.
I think it would do 20
Yeah.
minutes.
So we'll move right along here. I'm used to doing 3-day schools, so I draw things out a little bit. We'll talk more about this with pigs. If you're here, this is what we call Steve. So it's a simple transporter of everything vital for efficiency. Military, like my good acronyms. Again, it's simple, that I can tell the guys who are working, go get Steve. They know exactly what I'm talking about. And they go get Steve. They bring Steve. That way we can move whatever animals we have around the farm, whether it's pigs or turkeys, it's the same setup where we go. Now, this is where it gets really neat, is what we have a leader-follower system. What if we could set up one paddock, but move 2 sets of animals? Saves time that we're spending out there in the field. So we have a leader-follower here with turkeys and pigs. Turkeys go first, because they really like to graze and get all the bugs. Pigs come behind, because they will bust up the turkey campsites. The turkeys like to camp out in one spot. That's where we're gonna poop, that's where we're gonna roost. Pigs come in, they bust all that up, because they wanna root it, and they'll clean up whatever spilled feed the turkeys have. When the pigs disturb the soil, we'll talk about this in the pig talk, then we can overseed the ground with either a cover crop or a high value annual forage. And so this moves every 3 days. So turkeys move to the new spot, pigs move into where turkeys were, take down the net behind. One activity on the field has moved 2 different enterprises of animals.
How much room do you allow?
I'm sorry?
How much room do you allow them?
Great question. How much room are we giving them? About 20,000 square feet. So we measure
How many birds?
500. So we measure paddocks and how many nets it takes. So we'll say a 2x1. 2 nets down, 1 net across kind of thing. 2x2, 1x1. When they're young, we might start it as a 1x1, but then move it to a 2x1 as they get bigger. Guys, keeping it simple, real simple shade structure there. You just got to get shade up above them. $400 wagon. At an auction, some old IBC tanks, so PVC back before PVC cost an arm and a leg. This is BC before COVID, when PVC was cheap, but just getting shade up above them. Turkeys don't care. Some old feeders that we use. And again, there he is, very proud doggo with his custodians. All right, so loading them up and processing. This is our hog trailer. We don't have a special trailer that we use for the turkeys. That's what we move a lot of pigs around. Corralling them up with the hog panel again, turkeys will come right to it. They're the easiest animal to herd because they're super curious. And if you bring a trailer in, everybody wants to go check out the new trailer, so they'll run over. We load them on the trailer, and most of the turkeys we process on farm. We have a 20,000 bird exemption, so we can do a lot of poultry in our on-farm facility. Some are taken to a USDA processor so that we can ship them across state lines. So this is our setup right here. All right, got a couple minutes left. I want to get to the important stuff. How much should you charge for your turkey? Who is in the Facebook animal groups? You know, pastured pigs, all the various ones, pastured poultry. What's one of the most common questions that the newbies ask when they come in? What's everybody charging for piglets or pork chops or whatever? Which it's fine if you want to know what everyone else is doing, but unfortunately, that's how many people establish their price list. They're like, I'm in North Carolina, what's pork chops going for? Without walking through a process of understanding how much do you need to charge for pork chops, because it's going to be very different. Maybe someone needs to, has a much higher feed cost than others. That's a huge one. If you're making your own feed or buying it in or getting certified organic stuff. So you need to know what it is specifically to your operation. So we have what we call an animal cost sheet. We use this for every enterprise on the farm to find out what it's going to cost us to produce an animal, whether it's a chicken, a turkey, a piglet, a finished pig, finished beef, what have you. So we'll just run through it here with a couple minutes we have. How many animals are in the group or enterprise? So if you're running, say, turkeys in a 500 group or 500 head increments, that's what we use, because if we're going to do 500, then we might do 1,000. We're repeating the same set to go add in the next brick, so to speak, to the set. Replacements, that's only for a breeding operation. Feed, bedding, so that would be like brooding for turkeys. Movement, management and movement, that's where we plug in labor costs. This is a lot different than those of you who have farm businesses and are familiar with P&Ls and how the accountants like to have things. This is very different than a cost of goods sold, expenses, net profit, the way that they like to do. This enterprise wouldn't exist, or people would not be laboring on the farm if this enterprise didn't exist. So that needs to get plugged in up here. We're going to account for those costs. Infrastructure, so that's water systems, fences, roads, maintaining roads. Someone's paying for those truckloads of gravel on the farm lanes. That's got to get picked up somewhere. Gear, so that's like nets and the wire that we use, the drinkers that they have, real kind of 5-year shelf life type of stuff. Equipment, so this would be like the tractors that are taking the feed out there, the trailers that are involved, the processing equipment, all of that. You got to go through the exercise of breaking it down and finding out what needs to be allocated to each enterprise. And then ground, whether you're leasing it or renting it, how much does your ground cost? How much profit should you make on something? If you're selling direct to retail, how much profit should you make?
20-50% maybe?
Sure. There's no rule. There's no one saying you shall charge this or not more than this. So it should be, what do you feel good about charging for all of this cost right here? This is all capital that you could have put in the stock market. And if it was 2020, you would have made 40% on it. If it was this year, you made negative 30%. But, what's a good rate of return on your capital that you're going to put to work on your farm? Plug that number in. Loss coverage, so that's your mortality. You're going to have mortality in any enterprise. So you need to put that there. 5%, 10%, sometimes with turkeys, 30, 40% if something goes bad. You got to put that in there. That will spit out what the animal cost is, and we know how much we need to capture per animal in order to be profitable as an enterprise. So I'll show you how we do it for our operation. We have more of a basic Excel here. We just go down the list. $3.95 for a turkey poult. One thing I didn't talk about is you do not have to pay $10 to $12 a turkey poult. Talk to, around us, it's Abidjan, Valley of the Moon turkeys. Millions of turkeys every year, huge breeding operation. The butterball turkey that people eat You guys don't because you raise your own on pasture. The butterball turkey that everybody else eats is a hybrid. That is hatched from a female genetic line and a male genetic line that are hybrid for that specific turkey. So big producers, they only want the females from the one line. They only want the males from the other. So what are they doing with all those opposite sex birds? Tossing them. So you don't need to spend $10 on a turkey poult. You can spend, when we first started buying these, what's called off-sex birds, we were paying $1.50 a turkey poult. And they caught on that they could charge us more. But no one's told them yet that turkeys from, a small hatchery are $10 to $12 a turkey. So $4 is still a pretty good price. I'm not complaining. Feed, turkey feed is very expensive. If you have the right level of nutrition and minerals and all that stuff, it's an insane amount of supplements that go into a turkey ration. Labor, all these other costs that we just went through, processing costs for us to process a turkey on farms about $8. It costs $15 to $20 to have a USDA place do your turkeys. And then profit, we're putting that at 30%. And this spits out, we roughly need to make $60 per turkey. Who's surprised by that number? Okay. That's what it is.
I guess if your income's already
yeah, if we want to make money doing turkeys, we need to orient a price in that range. If that won't sell, then we aren't doing turkeys. But I'm not going to sell turkeys for $2 a pound and then come to a conference and complain that you can't make any money doing pastured turkeys. You've got to set the price where it needs to be. And trust me, people will pay, some people will pay the price for that. There's a company in Virginia that sells a certain type of heritage turkey that is dry processed. So it never touches water in the whole processing thing. And then it's aged. So it's a dry aged turkey. And it costs $250 per turkey. And they sell tens of thousands of them every year. So there is a market for high quality, high end meat out there. It's the job of your marketing people to find that. All right, so what that does, these are what the prices need to be. 12-pound turkey needs to be $5.08 a pound. All the way down to 16-pound turkey needs to be $3.80 a pound. That allows you to then start formatting a price list. So this is pulled directly from our website. You can see these prices are all a little bit higher than that. What you do when you're moving from producing an animal to marketing and sell it is you align your prices vertically first. So internal to your company, what does it need to cost? Then you're going to align your prices horizontally. That's when you're going to look at what's everybody else in the area doing. Average turkeys, pastured turkeys in the fall, in the areas where our competitors operate and sell, they all sell for $1.50 to $2 a pound higher than we do. So we can still have a very competitive price to what they're doing, and we can have a higher profit margin than the 30%. We're probably pushing 40, 45%, but we're still being very competitively horizontally to other producers.
Do you have marketing in your cost sheet there?
That's going to be picked up kind of in the processing and some of these like labor costs here, but no, and some of that is picked up down here in that profit margin.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
Okay.
these birds are picked up on farm or what? You deliver or?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So we deliver. You can pick up on farm, and we ship. Not enough time to go into all the other elements of it, but we do not harvest turkeys right before Christmas. We start killing turkeys in June and July. And they all go into cold storage. And they all come out 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, and they go out into distribution. So that way we know what we have, because you never want the customer who's like, I need, you don't have the turkey you said, and I'm so bummed that I need your gut. All right, last slide here. Simplified systems. Talk about 4 complementary actions or enterprises. Scale efficiency, knowing costs, and pricing power. That's the keys to any enterprise in a direct-to-retail farm. If you can hit those 5 things, you're in a very good position to have a profitable enterprise and a profitable farm. All right, we got 15 minutes or so.
What do you do for cold storage for your turkey? Is it on farm or do you run a place?
So we have, the question was about cold storage. We have a walk-in freezer on farm that we use just for distribution. So it's a 10 by 20. One of the fortunate things about being in the middle of poultry industry country is there are huge companies that service them for cold storage. So a lot of our product sits in a cold storage facility. It costs us like 20 bucks a month per pallet to keep our stuff there. And so we'll take it down, they freeze it, it sits at 80 below zero, it stays super cold, and when we want it back, Laura will handle it, call them up, say, hey, we need pallet 2163, and that pallet will come out, and pick it up, bring it back. Sure.
Do you work with a nutritionist, or how do you kind of gauge what your birds need while they're on pasture?
Yeah, so the question was about feed, and formulating. Yes, Firtrell formulates our feeds for us. We grind all of our own feed for pigs and poultry. So we work with them and say, hey, these are the local grains that we have and what we want to use, and they'll formulate that up and send it down to us. They even sent me a free hat. Learn you buy enough minerals from Firtrell, they give you a free hat. But yeah, turkeys are very protein heavy. A lot of supplements in that feed for them to grow out well. And that's why it's $850 a ton, even with us grinding our own feeds.
Do they come out and walk them to see how the birds are doing, or
No.
do you do that by eye?
No. So you're feeding them kind of a generalized feed that works well for turkeys. Turkeys are super aggressive at foraging and eating bugs. So whatever they get from that is kind of the frosting on top of the cake. So you set your feed to what it needs to be without any of the other stuff. And then if they eat their fill of grasshoppers and they graze a bunch of clover, hey, that's great for that day, but we're not counting on that for their nutrition to grow. You had a question in the back?
You talked about how the Salatin poultry
The shelters?
shelters are kind of phasing out. What are you putting in? Are you building new ones? Are you building
So
something else?
we are going to, again, a building that we designed ourselves. It's 20 by 24, kind of like a range coop, but a lot heavier.
Okay.
And what we're trying to do is make it dual purpose for poultry and pigs. Because what the problem with a lot of these huge poultry shelters is they're only used 6 months out of the year. And then it's just sitting there doing nothing for 6 months out of the year. So it's kind of the same idea of, can we have a structure that we can dual purpose, and that way we can use it for poultry in the summer, because pigs don't need a lot of shelter in the summer. They've got the trees and the woods, but then we can use it in the winter for the pigs. And we've got a good design. We're still working on making it work well for pigs, because pigs are a tad destructive.
Would you be doing it, moving it by hand, or are you moving it?
No, it's pulled by, it weighs like 4,000 pounds.
Okay.
Yeah, we want to make it heavy enough it doesn't blow away, because that's
Yep.
a problem with a lot of these MRCs that are out there now. You get a good 60-mile-an-hour thunderstorm, and the thing's going down to see the neighbors.
How many rations do you have for the age of the chickens? Changes?
Two.
2 rations.
Yeah, one when they're in the brooder and
So after
young.
5 weeks?
After about 8 to 9 weeks is when you switch.
So as you're transitioning, you swap. You
It's
switch.
basically less fish meal. That's what it is. You're dropping.
And so you're using fish meal for both?
Oh yeah, you use it. It's insane.
It's cheaper.
It's soybean meal, it's peanut meal, it's fish meal. I mean, you're trying to bump it up to like 26%. It's really hot. So, any questions over here? Does anybody?
I saw you have chickens as well. You keep them very much separate. Is there a way they could be complementary?
In the field, they'll cross the same areas. We do, when we are brooding turkeys, they have their own brooder. So, that's another thing that we've learned the hard way, but also is taught, by the industry, is there are bacteria that chickens are fine with that will absolutely kill turkeys. And so they have their own brooder. When we're doing turkeys, when we're done with turkeys, we will brood chickens in that brooder for the rest of the season if we need to, but you don't want to be switching back and forth. And, I'm not on board with the brooding turkeys and chickens together. You're going to have mortality because there's, things that are natural to chickens that are going to kill those turkeys. Good question.
Equipment in the brooder, chickens will use the turkey stuff then? Or do you switch?
If you saw in that picture, we use the standard toggle drinkers for the chickens, and then the turkey ones is just tied to the bottom of that. So we've got these little racks on the wall that we'll just attach them, put them up on the wall when we're done with turkeys, and then just have the regular ones for the chickens. Yeah, that's the only difference that we have as far as drinkers.
What do you use for your bedding in your brooder for your turkeys?
Great question. Yeah, I should have pointed that out in those slides.
Can you keep repeating questions?
So the question was, what do you use for bedding? You do not want to use wood chips for bedding your turkey brooders. Because again, turkeys are dummies, and so they like to eat bedding. And if you're having a mortality issue in your brooder, you figured out that it's not a heat issue, it's not a draft issue, it's probably they're eating the bedding. They get bored, they want to peck at stuff, they'll eat wood chips. So we use peat moss. Very expensive. It's going to cost a couple $100 to bed a brooder with peat moss, but it's worth every penny that it's not going to kill them. They will still eat a lot of the peat moss, but it's fine enough that they'll just digest it and it will run through their digestive system. Once per flock. Yeah. And if you're having an issue over the 5 weeks, that you get a wet area or something, just have an extra bale of peat moss there, and you can just throw a little bit on that spot. Now, your gardening buddies, they will hop over themselves to get that bedding from you when you're done at the end of the season. If you've got a dump trailer full of peat moss with turkey manure mixed in, that's worth a lot to them. So you can have a way of recouping some of your costs by selling it to your CSA guys.
Do you use the deep bedding with the turkeys, or
No,
is it
inch and a half.
inch and a half? So how often do you clean it out?
Once per cycle.
Once per cycle.
Yep.
And just an inch and a half.
Yep.
And it doesn't get too gross for ammonia.
No, because you solve. So there's a question on ammonia issues in the brooder. Bedding getting gross. That's a ventilation problem. So even if the brooder is sitting at the perfect temperature, we're still ventilating it every 3 minutes. Even if it's only on what's called a percentage timer is what runs the ventilation on that. So we would have it set for, say when they're a day old, 10% at 3 minutes. So that means every 3 minutes it's going to kick on for 10% of 3 minutes. So 18 seconds, is what it's going to run. And you can gradually adjust that up as the birds get older. It's what you're wanting to exhaust is all the moisture. You want the brooder to stay fairly dry, and that real humid heat that's coming off of them, vent it out of the brooder. Now, if you've got an area like they like to splash around in the water and spill some of it over, for that little spot, that's where we have that extra bale that you can just take a scoop of peat moss and toss it over that area, and you'll be fine.
You've got a video on YouTube walking through your brooder,
Yeah.
with electronics and stuff.
Yeah, so if you want to see more on any parts of this, we've got a couple videos on our YouTube channel. So just, go to YouTube, go to FarmBuilder, and you can see more in-depth on particular topics there for brooding. Got a couple there on how the brooders were built, and the turkeys out in the field. We got a couple more.
Do you have any thoughts on conventional versus heritage as far as efficiencies or hardiness or?
Yeah, so the question was on hardiness for conventional breed, which would be the broad-breasted whites, over the bronzes or the other heritage type breeds. Yeah, the heritage type breeds are hardier when you put them out there, but they're also probably more inclined to fly away and roost in the trees and leave. It comes down to what works in your specific context. Do you have a market that's willing to pay a premium on that bronze? The bronze poult is going to cost you $15, or even some of the more exotic ones, 20, 25 bucks a poult. And can your market support that price and support the mortality that you might run, where you got to recoup 20% mortality, so you're now adding those costs back in. We like using the whites, because we can get the poults really cheap. That's a huge one right there. That if we're brooding 1,500 birds in a season, we can get it for $4 a poult as opposed to $10 or $12. That gives us a lot of room to maneuver price-wise. So there's some markets that will pay the premium for the bronze. Most people, though, they're just looking for attachment. If you explain what we're doing, it's a real good sell point when we tell them, hey, we're using off-sex birds. Like these birds otherwise are going into the grinder once they're sexed at hatching. So we're giving this turkey that is just a waste product to the industry, we're giving it a turkey life on the farm. And there's a whole kind of moral and ethical side that can go with that story branding. But if the bronzes work for you and you can get a premium for them, sure, go for the bronzes. One I really want to try, have you ever heard of midget whites? So it's one that finishes really well, like 8 pounds. That's our biggest request right now. People want smaller birds. It was interesting, those of you who sell turkeys, during COVID, people wanted really small birds. And And this was the first year where it kind of switched back. And people were like, hey, do you have any 18-pounders or 24-pounders? You know, because you can gauge the family gathering size by how big a turkey people order. So you know who's got the big families and who's got the small families. Over there.
So, what time in the spring are you putting your first ones out? I mean, you said 1,500, so you're doing what, 3 groups a year?
Yeah. So the question was, what time in the spring are we putting them out? Yeah, we run 3 cycles, like
So
last year.
what age is their process then?
So the first ones we'll put in the brooder late February, early March, and they're going to go out to the field in April. But essentially, we want 40-degree nights. If you drop much below 40, it's going to be an issue for the birds. Maybe you just want to hold them in the brooder a little bit longer. So we push some groups in the brooder out to 6-7 weeks if necessary. I'd rather do that than have half of them die the first night you put them out. That'd be really stupid. So we start butchering turkeys in June, and we usually wrap it up in October, because who's butchered turkeys in freezing weather? Yeah, it really sucks. When the hoses are freezing and your fingers are so cold you can't feel what you're doing. What we offer, though, is there are those customers who want a fresh turkey, right? Most of them want the fresh turkey because they don't have the freezer space to put a frozen one. So we have a defrosting service. If you want a defrosted turkey, $10. We'll put it in our fridge 4 days earlier and we'll thaw it out for you. And guess what? 20, 30 birds, they'll go like that. So another little way to make a couple $100 extra. We have some questions over here, guys.
Yeah, I was curious with your livestock guardian dogs, if you purchased them as puppies from a farm that had poultry, or if there's anything specific that you did to make sure that they were suitable to be thriving with your turkeys.
Right. So the question was on the LGDs. You know, where do you get them? How do you train them? Both of the ones that we've had were both rescues from people who just couldn't handle them. I mean, they're a big rambunctious dog. I mean, they're kind of a pain too if they ever get out. Like both of them, miles. Sheriffs and me are real good on each other's speed dial when it comes to the dogs. Like they get out and they just go, and they're not getting into trouble, but they just like to go. So fortunately, both of the ones that we've had were kind of familiar with a farm already. They're very instinctual about whatever animal you put them with. That big boofy one you saw there with the turkeys, we put him in with pigs just to see how he would do. And we put him in with a set of pigs that had a pregnant gilt in with it, and she farrowed. And he was uber protective of those piglets. Like he sat right next to that sow and her piglets. Any other pig came over, it was teeth back and ran them off, and it was hilarious to watch. So we haven't had to train LGDs for it. We've been able just to get rescues from other farms that needed to move on from their dogs, and we're like, sure, we'll take him and see how he does.
Okay.
There's a lot of good resources out there on LGDs. People vastly more knowledgeable than me. I just use it. All right, 2 more questions.
My question was just on, like in my neighborhood north of here quite a ways, June, July, we're getting some pretty rank grass ahead of cattle. You guys have to go through and trim ahead of the turkeys, or will the turkeys knock it down, or is it size dependent, or what?
The question was on how high is the grass in the forage when you run the turkeys. I've never found it worth the effort to mow it down in front of them. This fall we ran a group of turkeys through a field that had forage sorghum in it that we hadn't grazed, and it was like 8-9 feet tall. And the first day the turkeys kind of just stood around the wagon, like, what's this? But eventually, within 3 days, they had knocked down all of the understory underneath the forage sorghum. The forage sorghum was still up there. And as we went through, we knocked it down some too, because they started eating the seeds off of it. So the only thing that we mow is the lanes where the fence go. We let the turkeys knock everything else down. Okay. All right, one more question, guys.
What do your turkeys do at night? I didn't see any roosters, a place for them to roost. Do they just kind of hang out in the ground?
Most, especially the broad-breasted whites, they like to sleep on the ground. Some of them like to roost, maybe 20%. And so the shade wagons that we use, that big one that you saw there, they would just sit on that guardrail frame. That thing would be completely full of them roosting on there. The ones we use now have 3x3 oak cross members on them as part of the structure. And some of the birds will sleep on there, but 80% of them, they prefer to sleep on the ground. And so they'll just make a huddle pile wherever they want to, and that's where they camp out. What the potential issue there is breast blister, right? If they're sleeping on the ground, that's if they're sleeping and there's a lot of manure. So as long as your birds are moving frequently enough, which we're using that leader follower with the pigs, so they're moving every 3 days. There's not a lot of time to accumulate that poop that will cause the skin irritation, the burning that would lead to breast blistering.
Does heavy rain cause a problem for them if they're not under a shelter and they're?
Depends on how, so question was on rain. Depends on how old they are. You know, if it's a 8-week-old turkey that's in the shelters and they've got 3 inches of water under their feet, yeah, they're not going to be happy. So we make sure to run the pens up in areas where it's not going to get wet like that, and we're not going to have standing water. Now, once they're this size right here, weather's not going to kill them. We've had them out in 4 inches of snow, and they're just out doing turkey things. You know, heavy thunderstorms, you have enough shelter for them. They're just standing out in the rain, just taking it like a champ. So they're pretty hardy once they get bigger, but when they're in that 10 weeks or below, they're pretty fragile, so you need to be careful about keeping them sheltered. Got enough for one more question.
What do you do with like the stuff that you don't sell? I mean, if you 1,500 birds, what do you do with the extras? Or?
Right. So the question was on what do you do with all the extra birds? I'm not recommending the first year that you try doing pasture turkeys that you go raise 1,500. All right. Start with less than 50 and just see how it goes. If you can't sell them, it really depends on the regulations in your state. We can sell turkey parts, so we break them down. Yeah. So we sell a lot of ground turkey, like we can grind it. That sells pretty well. Turkey breast sells well, thighs, legs, all that will move pretty well during the rest of the year. If you have a certified kitchen and you can cook turkey down into like a pulled turkey product, it sells really well, especially this time of year. And that's what we do with a lot of the drumsticks. Drumsticks are pretty hard to sell. Cook them down, do the work of getting all the tendons out and stuff. You can sell that for $15 a pound. So, you know, if you need to, you have to make the adjustments year to year. That's why we like producing all of our turkeys earlier in the season, because Laura knows exactly how many turkeys, like she categorizes it into weight classes. She knows exactly what we have before we start selling turkeys in October. We don't let our customers order till October. And that way we know we'll inventory this many smalls, this many mediums, this many larges, and when it sells out on the website, we're gonna buy something else. I think we were supposed to wrap it up then. I'll hang around. You guys want to stay and chat?